Express are Australia's leading ordering service, offering a wide range of quality gardening products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show, you jump online and visit their website.
Hello and welcome back to the Garden Gurus live show. I'm Darren Senor. I'm clearly not Trevor Cochrane. He's away. He's probably on a plane somewhere. Should be back next week, but till then, you've got me, you lucky ducks. Make sure you look out for another great episode of the Garden Gurus this weekend, and I'm looking forward to sharing all things growing and green with you as always. Remember, we've got some great prizes to give away during the live shows. So get your questions in and go in the running to win yourself a $50 gift voucher from Garden Express. And make sure you put your location in with your question. It makes it so much easier to give you a really accurate answer with your problem. We're looking forward to another warm, sunny, late autumn day in Perth. We're actually going to get some rain today, apparently. Looking a bit colder in Hobart, only 13 degrees. That's a little too chilly for me, but up at Brisbane, 24. Let us know how the weather's looking at your part of Australia and what you're planning on doing in the garden today. Now, we're lucky enough this morning to be joined by Rowan Peterson from Garden Express. He's going to give us a little bit of a rundown on what they've got to offer and what great value packs they've got to put out for us. Good morning, Rowan. How are you? And how's the weather in Melbourne?
Morning, Darren. It's cold. Yeah, we've had a bit of a cold snap the last week or so. It's definitely cooled down, and we're heading towards winter. It feels like we're already there, actually.
Well, I was in Melbourne on Wednesday, and I can attest, yeah, it is cold. I think it was 5 degrees when I got off the plane, which is probably about 20 degrees less than what I've been used to. We've had a very long, warm autumn in Perth and rain-free. So we're supposed to get some rain this evening. Fingers crossed we do, because we desperately need it. But how's things going in Garden Express? And I believe you've got a great offer on some calla lilies. So
Yeah, we've got callas on special today. That's what's going to go onto the show tomorrow, on the Garden Gurus tomorrow. So we've got 3 calla lily collections. These all consist of 3 different colours. So you've got a couple of different ones to choose from as far as colours goes: pinks, oranges, some of those really dark blacks, which are stunning. Like I said, 3 to choose from. They are normally $47.70. We've got them for Garden Gurus viewers today and over the weekend for just $35. So that's a saving of a little over 20%, which is fantastic.
That's sounds like an absolute great buy. Now, some people may not be familiar with callas. They might get them a little mixed up, maybe canna lilies. So they're completely different beasts. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how they grow and how they work in the garden?
So I've got a corm here to show you. I don't know if viewers have sort of seen it. So it's not like a traditional bulb. It's actually a corm, and you can just see there. You can see that there's a lot of little spikes coming out in various parts of the corm there. That's the flower spike that will grow once it's established. So it's a decent sized corm, and that does multiply like any other bulb. Generally, from a Garden Express perspective, we'll sell them around about this size, and that can be anywhere from 3 to 7. I think this one's got about 12 flower spikes ready to come out. So you're getting a really nice, healthy corm for your spend, which is really, really good.
That one looks like it's just about ready to go and pop out. So what would the gardener do with that once they receive it in the post?
So you can either put it in a pot. These things will thrive in a pot, obviously, or you can put it straight into the ground. And like I said, you're going to get, well, this one I think's got about 12. So this particular corm, you're going to get 12 flower spikes from, which is fantastic. Really easy. Good thing about a calla is it's a very long-lasting flower. Great for cut flowers. It's not going to die off very quickly. So you're going to get an extended season as far as the flower goes. And like I said, generally, from a corm, you're going to get somewhere between 7 to 12 flower spikes from that single corm.
Sun, shade, preference for either for them?
So they will like a part sun to a full sun position in the garden. It's probably going to become stronger as the plant provides. So as I mentioned, I've got another one here that shows an extension So this one you can actually see a little bit differently how it's going to multiply. So as they multiply, as they start to multiply, they can actually be divided, and then it's probably going to become stronger as it does start to multiply. But you can leave it in the ground and it's going to come up every year, but it will die off like any other bulb.
Yeah, so they die right down to ground level. But does the gardener need to lift them every year, or can you just happily leave them in the ground for year after year?
Yeah, don't need to. Obviously, as far as lifting them and separating them when they become an unmanageable clump, but they can quite easily stay in the ground, particularly in the cooler climates. So yeah, pretty versatile. Brilliant little bulb.
Yeah, well, and things that can grow in pots and grow happily in pots are always popular with gardeners. A lot of people gardening in smaller spaces, so they're gardening in pots. And the thing I like about the calla lilies is the colour range is absolutely amazing. I think you mentioned the really dark red, black red ones. Yeah. They're absolutely stunning. I've seen them in mass flower, and they will blow your socks off when you see them in their full glory.
Yeah, and some of them do have not so much a variegated foliage, but a spotted foliage. So the foliage itself, once the flower does die down, obviously it's going to die down completely, but the foliage is quite attractive as well. Like I said, at the moment we've got online various colours. We've got oranges, we've got pinks, we've got those dark blacks, we've got whites, we've got various different colours, some bicolours, some nice whites with purple throats and things like that. So available online as the collections, but also available as individual varieties. So individual varieties are $14.90. You're going to get one of those types of corms in that pack. Otherwise, the collections that we mentioned earlier, once again, $35, pack of 3, and they will be those selected colours that you'll see online. Normally $44.70, so 20% saving.
That sounds like a great way to go, especially if you don't have any at the moment. You want to build a bit of a collection up. Now, Holly, our producer, she was a bit worried. Sounds like she's got about 30 cats at her house. Are they? Do you need to keep them away from your cats and dogs?
They are toxic to cats. It's like most lilies. These ones form or contain what's called a calcium oxalate crystals. And that can definitely cause some irritation to your cat's mouth if ingested, and then as it goes down, belly aches and stuff like that. So it is recommended to keep away from cats that like to eat flowers and things like that. For sure.
Yeah, it's like anything in the garden though. You just if you've got pets and even small children, you got to be a little bit careful of what's accessible to them. Now we've got a couple of listeners who've just sent us messages in. Also, Rowan, who are existing Garden Express customers. Jeanette Fenton got her show bag of 170 bulbs and yellow raspberries and wanted to say a big thank you. Reckons they're in fantastic condition. Very, very happy with them. Thanks. And Penny Rowland just says, I love Garden Express. So you must be doing something right, keeping the people happy. And another listener, Leslie Hennessy, says she loves the canna lilies as well, and she uses them as a small screen. They look great. So that's good feedback for you.
That's brilliant feedback. We actually have some cannas online at the moment too. So anybody interested in canna lilies, we have some of those available online now as well, which is fantastic.
Yeah, they're a great brand, very versatile. Now, I do also believe something a little bit different for you guys. You're offering the Wollemi pines at the moment.
Yeah, we do. So we actually one of the sole commercial propagators of Wollemi pine here in Australia. So we at the moment are selling Wollemi pines in 3 different sizes. We've got a 150ml pot, a 200ml pot, and a 300ml pot available online at the moment with the Wollemi pine. What people may not realise is it's actually the 30th year anniversary this year of the rediscovery of the Wollemi pine. It's been 30 years since that happened. It doesn't quite feel like that, but 30 years on, and obviously we've been working incredibly hard to safeguard the populations of the Wollemi pine, which is fantastic.
No, it's great because they're a beautiful little pine tree. It look fantastic in pot. Could be a Christmas tree as well if you grew them in a nice pot, bought them inside for a little period over Christmas and took took them back out again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the good thing about a Wollemi pine is it's quite happy to live in a pot all of its life, really. We've got, as I said, we've got some 300 mil pots, which are some quite large pots. They're about 8 to 10 years old now. And they've been in those pots all their life, and they're quite happy. They almost bonsai themselves to the size of the pot you put them in. Obviously, won't grow too much taller than what they are when they arrive if you buy one of the larger pots. But don't really need to be potted up sort of any more than that if you don't want it to get too high. So if you want to keep it as a sort of a nice Christmas tree type size, yeah, definitely keep it in a pot. And it's not going to get too tall because these things can grow up to 40 meters in the wild.
In the wild and in perfect conditions as well. So that's really very, very interesting little plant. Rowan, now we're going to throw to the video and have a bit of a look at some of the other deals you've got on the canna lilies for the Garden Gurus viewers for this weekend. So thank you very much.
Excellent.
Kia. It sounds like an opera title, doesn't it? The common name? Calla lily. And wow, what a symphony for your garden. And in my view, it's prettier than Madame Butterfly. These blooms are so eye-catching in the garden. Really vivid colours and saturated tones. And the bonus is they aren't fleeting. They stick around. They also make for great long-lasting cut flowers. And the following year, yet more value again. Why? Well, they're going to multiply and clump via the pups below. And speaking of great value, our mates at Garden Express have curated 3 separate calla lily autumn bags for you to choose from. All 3 bags have 3 different bulbs of colours at just $35 for the entire bag. So that's a 20% saving if you order today, and now being the perfect time to plant these operatic babies. So roll over Beethoven.
I could even see the Wollemi pine in the background of that video, Rowan.
You spotted that?
Yeah. Penny also messaged in. She said she's waiting, not patiently, but she is waiting for the next release of fuchsias. How far away are they?
Fuchsias won't. The potted fuchsias that we've done recently were actually around the MIFGS time, so the Melbourne International Flower and Garden Show. So she's just missed those ones for the year, unfortunately. We may have some larger potted stuff a little bit later in the year, but generally we're selling fuchsias around late February, early March.
Yeah, when they're in full flower and looking their best, I guess. So Penny will just have to wait. I'm sure it'll be worth the wait. And so thank you very much for your time. Really appreciated having a quick chat with you this morning, Rowan, and all the best for the rest of the working week.
Awesome, mate. Thank you. Have a great weekend, and we'll catch up soon.
You too. See ya.
See ya.
Well, it's time for your questions now. We're going to start with Lucian Freeman. Says, good morning. The climate change in Perth, is it still considered a temperate gardening zone? My location, she's in Kelmscott, and it feels a bit more like we're in the arid zones. Well, Lucian, you've got a lot of people who would strongly agree with you with Perth's climate zone now and talk more about it being an arid zone than a temperate zone or a Mediterranean zone. But it does fluctuate a little bit throughout our seasons, so we do have the capacity to grow plants in Perth, particularly in Kelmscott. It's actually a great gardening suburb in Perth where you can grow a wide variety of plants from all different parts of the world. So a little bit of it's about setting up microclimates, but also making sure you're providing the requirements for whatever plant you want to grow, whether you're growing fruit trees or ornamentals or natives. So making sure the soil suits their requirements, and you set up your irrigation system to work perfectly with those type of plants. So you're not underwatering, but also you don't want to be overwatering as well. It's something I do see a little bit in my travels around suburban gardens. People putting too much water on one area and not enough on other areas just because the irrigation's not set up right. But I do think in Perth, we will be looking for growing plants that are tolerant of the long, hot, dry summers that we've just experienced, as I think this will become more of a far more common occurrence than as a one-off, which we hope it was this year. But that said, let's hope we get a bit of rain and we can get our gardens back looking in fantastic condition. Now, Heather Zimmer has discovered some borers in her eucalypt tree. Eucalypts are a little bit susceptible to borers. Sometimes it is a major problem, sometimes it's not. It's one of those things where if the tree is otherwise healthy, if it's got access to enough water, if there's enough nutrients in the soil around, if everything else is okay, the eucalypts will tolerate a bit of borer action. You can go through the tree and cut some of the dead branches out and try and remove some of those borer affected parts of the tree. The other thing some people do is get themselves a long thin piece of wire and push the wire down through the borer holes and try and get those borers actually out of the tree. There are systemic insecticides that can be applied to the trees as well to try and kill those borers off. So you can get a granular insecticide that's taken up through the root system. That's probably the most effective way with trees, and try and get them under control like that. But the most important thing you can do is keep that tree otherwise healthy. If the soil around it is particularly dry, then get some water onto it, get some good quality wetting agent, get the moisture moving through that soil profile, and apply some native fertilizer. Try and get the tree in really good healthy condition so it can tolerate and basically survive through the borer attack. Remove those damaged branches, and if you want to apply a systemic insecticide to the root system to try and take out whatever other borers are left in the tree. Good luck with that. It's terrible seeing your trees getting hit by any sort of pest and disease, and you want to keep them as healthy as possible. We need more trees. Jeanette Fenton in Glenorick in Victoria, a friend gave her a large pot with 2 chestnut trees in it, about 1 to 2 foot tall. It's been ready to plant for a while now, wants to know how to look after them. Has read about blight being a problem with chestnut trees. So yeah, there are a few pests and diseases that attack chestnut trees. Again, as I said with the eucalypt trees, one of the secrets to making them more resilient to pests like blight is to make sure they're growing in a good healthy soil. So chestnuts like a heavier clay soil, some organic material mixed in there, so some compost, well-aged animal manure, give them a really good start. Open sunny area with plenty of air movement. You don't want them in areas where there's a lot of too many other trees around it and the air movement isn't sufficient to try and keep those fungal diseases under control. Once they're in the ground, they're growing, they're pretty easy care. You fertilise them once or twice a year, so you fertilise them in spring and then again at the start of summer. Applying a wetting agent during the hot weather to make sure that water is really soaking into those soils. That's it. Probably the biggest issue you can have with chestnut trees is the soil drying out. They don't like a dry root system. They naturally occur in areas that have quite damp soil, so they're quite tolerant of wetter soils as well. So you often see them in their natural habitat growing quite near rivers and streams where the ground stays wet pretty much all year. So just keeping that soil moist and keeping them well fed, and they should grow very easily for you. Once they're established, they're a very hardy tree. Within 4 to 5 years, you'll probably start seeing some nut production. And once they start producing nuts, they produce huge crops of them as well. Just perfect timing to roast away in the middle of winter. Now, Claire Jenkins in Caversham in WA, what should we be doing with her couch grass? She wants to know what to do with the couch grass right now. Well, probably one of the main things you need to do in Claire, as we go into some cooler weather, into the winter, the couch finally slows down. So it grows like virtually a weed through summer and even autumn, particularly with our long, warm autumn we've had over here in WA. That couch will still be actively growing. You want to keep it actively growing as deep into winter as possible. So applying a liquid fertilizer at this time of the year, as soon as the weather starts to cool down, the nutrients in the granular fertilizers aren't quite as readily available. So a foliar spray of a liquid fertilizer will keep the color in the couch, but also keep it vigorous. So it won't slow down and it won't be susceptible to having patches that die out through a little bit of wear and tear and just from lack of vigor through winter. That's pretty much all you need to do. You can put on still enough time to put on a pre-emergent for a weed spray. So if you're worried about things like wintergreen, winter grass and some of the broadleaf weeds, you can apply a pre-emergent spray at this time of the year, which will actually prevent the weed seeds from germinating, which is much better than trying to have to deal with the weeds once they're up and growing, because it doesn't matter what the weather's like, the weeds still grow really well. So a pre-emergent, some liquid fertilizer, lift your mowing height by a little bit, and be on the lookout for any parts of the lawn that stay wet. So if you've got some low-lying parts of the grass, parts that may have been compacted over summer, too much kids playing footy, too many dogs running around on it, you might need to get a pitchfork in there, loosen the ground up and allow that water to drain through the grass more effectively. Now, Clive Fox in Ipswich has sent us some photos through of his lawn, and he's got a broadleaf weed growing through it. You certainly have, Clive. There's quite a lot of it in there. A little bit hard for me to pick what that weed is. It looks like it's been mowed down quite recently. It could be a carex weed. It could be one of the nutgrass type things. So Clive wants to know if there's a specific spray he can use on that lawn to kill off the broadleaf weed without killing off his lawn. Now, if it is a carex weed, if it's a type of nutgrass, there certainly are some sprays you can get, but you really need to identify that weed, what the exact weed is, what species it is, so you can find the exact right spray to apply it. Worst thing you can do is just be applying multiple broadleaf weed sprays and hope you get the right one. So if you've got a good local lawn contractor in your area, goes around and does lawn spraying, I would be asking them to come and have a look and see if they can identify what the weed is for you. And I would even employ them to do the spraying for you. They'll have the right chemicals, the right safety gear, and the know-how to apply that perfectly for you so you can knock it off and try and get rid of it altogether. See, you've been doing a little bit of hand weeding through there. That is not the best job in the world to be doing. I think if you can get somebody to come in, knows exactly what they're doing, apply a selective herbicide and try and knock that weed out of your lawn, you'll be far better. But good luck with that. Weed, if it is a carex grass, they're very hard to get rid of, and it does look like it's got a solid hole in your grass there. So good luck with that, and I hope you can get rid of it without too much trouble. Now, Tina Weber in Edgewater has got herself a Metadella plant from Queensland and wants to know how to care for it in WA. Well, these plants, their species name is Magnifica, and it's because they are absolutely magnificent when they flower. Beautiful plant. Bits cold tolerant, cold sensitive though. So you need to find somewhere in your garden or on a patio where you still get good natural light, but it's a little bit warmer and drier over winter. Resist the temptation to repot it or put it into too big of a pot. It needs to be in very free draining potting mix and keep it a little on the drier side through the cooler months. So that will be basically from now till the end of September. Keep it a little bit dry so the soil is only just moist. As soon as it warms up, start of October, middle of October, you can look to start liquid feeding and putting a granular fertilizer on that plant and get it growing. They really love the warmer weather and they like humidity as well. So if you can mist it during the warmer months as well, you'll keep it in perfect condition and it'll start growing very strongly, and then you'll get those magnificent flowers coming out towards the end of summer and into autumn. Beautiful plant, and best of luck with that. Gillian Fengler watches our show every morning. Thank you, Gillian. We appreciate that. Now, she has a Japanese maple in a large pot. It's been doing really, really well. It's 2 years old. Now that it's autumn, it's losing all its leaves. She's just asking what she needs to do to prune it to keep it in its weeping shape. So it must be one of the weeping Japanese maples. So they're a variety of maples that's grafted onto a seedling Japanese maple and has that beautiful umbrella shape. Absolutely magnificent plants. Perfect if you live in the cooler zones of Australia. You can go through and prune it if you want to just tidy it up a little bit. It shouldn't need too much. Occasionally you'll see a few damaged branches or branches where there's a little bit of dieback. You can go through and just tidy that up a little bit. As I said, you won't need to do too much with it. When we come into spring, you'll see that beautiful fresh growth burst out. You get the little flower heads and the fresh growth coming straight on top of that. And then you can fertilise it. Controlled release fertilizer in a pot, Osmocote would be absolutely ideal. And then it'll grow very happily. Make sure with the Japanese maple, particularly once the weather starts warming up, so back end of spring, you need to make sure that pot does not dry out. It needs to be kept moist right through the warmer weather, or you'll see scorching and your foliage will brown off and not look anywhere near as nice as what it can. Beautiful plant, and it'd be something you can keep in that pot for many, many years and really enjoy. Danny Isip, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, wants to know a spray for black spot on papaya plants. Papayas are pretty susceptible to a range of different fungal diseases. With the black spot, you can spray it with a general fungicide. Something like a copper spray would do the job pretty effectively. Again, with the papaya, make sure there's good air movement through there so to minimise the fungal diseases. If there's a lot of black spot on any particular leaves, I would be taking those off and removing them from the plant and bagging them up and throwing them in the bin, just because they're you don't want to get the black spot to get to a point where it's producing spores and you're getting a lot of black spot through that plant, because, as I said, papayas are very susceptible to fungal diseases. If they get hold of a papaya plant, they can actually knock them off altogether and you lose them. So get on top of it early, spray it with a copper-based fungicide, and you should get on top of it pretty quickly. Christine Rankin in Stirling. Good morning, Christine. How are you? Is going away for a little over 3 weeks and has a few indoor plants and patio plants that will need some water. She's going, am I able to leave them indoor plants in a tub of water so they don't need to get anyone to tend them in? Well, you can, Christine. You can put them in a tub of water so they can actually wick the water up. Whether that'll last for 3 weeks is probably questionable. If you can get somebody in, to have a look at that while you're away, that would certainly help a lot. So, and you can put a wetting agent, even a little bit of weak liquid fertilizer in that water as well. So you sit them in the pot, sit them in the tub with a little bit of water. Don't bring it up too far up the pot, probably 2 or 3 centimeters. Allow that plant to wick that up, but then allow it to dry out a little bit. So if it does dry between that tub being filled up with water again, that's ideal. You don't want the plants constantly sitting in water, because that can lead to things like root rot disease, which nobody wants to see in your indoor plants. Now, I'm going to take a little break from the questions for a couple of minutes and just have a chat about the plant of the day. So I'll bring that in. And it's this little beauty. It's called a Plectranthus, and this variety is called Mona lavender. Now, I just want to make sure everyone understands it's a Plectranthus and not a lavender. Some people do get confused with that common name and think it's a type of lavender. Plectranthus is a very different type of plant from lavenders altogether. This one gets its name, obviously, from the colours of the flower. Beautiful mauve lavender. And as you can see, masses and masses of them. Not a shy flower at all. This is a perfect plant if you've got a shady area that still gets a little bit of natural light, and they will grow very happily in that shade. Perfect in pots, mass planted in the ground around trees, shrubs, anywhere you want big swathes of flower colour through late summer, right through autumn months. Also has very attractive foliage, sort of a very dark green on the top, and the underneath of the foliage is a purple, almost black colour. So you get that beautiful foliage variation as well. Very easy plant to grow. So this time of the year, you just sit back and enjoy the flowers. You don't need to do anything else. Once the flowering is finished, you can go through, give them a light tidy up. So just remove all the spent flowers, any damaged or old looking foliage, just snip that off, trim them up, just a light trim. Once we come into spring, then you can give them a feed. So a granular fertilizer, a slow release fertilizer, Osmocote, Triforte, any of those products would be perfect. As the weather warms up, you see them starting to put on a lot of growth. They love the warm weather. So nice shady spot, but plenty of warm weather coming on, and they'll grow very vigorously and fill out. While they're growing, good idea to tip prune. Give them a light tip prune as they're actively growing, and that'll encourage them to get quite bushy. They're quite strong growers when they get growing. And then towards the middle of summer, they'll start setting their flower buds. By the end of summer, they're in flower. And then, as I said, they will flower right through the autumn months. A couple of other varieties of this Plectranthus available. So there's ones in sort of magenta colours and dark purple. So you can pick yourself all of one or pick a mix of them, mass plant them up in pots. Just make sure in pots that the soil is free draining and that they don't stay too wet for too long. So over the winter months, you might want to pull them under an eave or somewhere where they get a little less rain so that that potting mix doesn't get soggy. Another good thing about the Plectranthus, if you're growing them at home and you want to multiply the numbers, they are quite easy to propagate as well. So you can take some cuttings towards the end of summer, put them in some propagation mix, and by the start of spring, they'll be ready to either plant out or pot up into bigger pots. So in your local garden centres this time of the year, they'll be available very easily. Plenty of them around, very popular plant, but one really worth looking out for. Plectranthus Mona lavender. Dave has asked if the Plectranthus has a smell. No, Dave, they do not. They're not a perfume plant. They've got every other aspect going for them, but they didn't get the perfume, unfortunately. Still very worthwhile plant having in your garden. Now, moving back onto the general questions. So Janine Napier in Beachborough has a couple of succulent plants with a mould type presence in the foliage. So it looks like you've got a bit of mealybug getting in there, Janine. I would go through and prune some of that affected foliage out and then spray the plant with something like Conguard or Success Ultra and try and knock that off. Make sure you give the soil, if they're in the ground or in a pot, give that soil a bit of a drench as well, because that mealy bug will overwinter and live in the soil and then come back out to infect your plant as well. It's a bit of a troublesome pest, mealybug. You see it in a lot of plants that are densely foliage, so it does like a lot of the succulents, such as in this example, but also strap leaf plants like clivias, agapanthus, even sometimes in kangaroo paws, you will see the mealybug get in there, and they like the protection of those really densely leaved plants. So keep an eye out for it around your other plants as well. It's one of those pests you really need to get on early. Don't let it get a hold of your garden or a hold of particular plants, because then it becomes much more difficult to control. Good luck with that. It's not good seeing those sort of pests getting into your plants. Vomita in Melbourne has a cherry plant that's been giving a good harvest for a number of years, but last summer there were no flowers and no cherries. It's happened for the first time. Wants to know what they can do to make sure it doesn't repeat. Well, with cherries, it's often an issue of chilling. So you need enough chilling hours. If you've had a warm period in Melbourne and you didn't get sufficient chilling hours, that can stop the cherry tree from flowering. The other thing is making sure the soil is in good condition as well. So have a bit of a scratch around the base of the plant. See if the soil is holding moisture, if it's still free draining, if it's nice and crumbly, or whether that's got very dense and heavily compacted. So you may need to look at doing something like digging some compost through that soil. Even just layering some compost on the top of the soil will help. Some well-aged animal manure, keeping it really well watered through the summer months is important. Cherries do like moist soil. They don't like it when the soil dries out. So keeping them well watered is really important. So you might need to use a wetting agent just to get that moisture to move right through that soil profile and take the root system of the plant with them, and encourage that root system to stay nice and deep so it will stand up to the summer. And they need to be fed as well. So in the start of spring, once they've had their flowers, foliage will start coming out. Great idea to feed them. The Troforte for fruit trees is ideal for cherries. So you can apply that to the soil and then mulch the trees. Hopefully you'll get enough chilling this winter to get some flowers on and another cherry crop, because it's obviously very disappointing when you grow a fruiting tree for a whole year and you don't get any fruit of it. Makes you wonder why you bothered. But so hopefully a bit of extra chilling and you'll get plenty of fruit on that cherry tree this year. Now, Sharon Lee from Victoria has sent in a picture of her maple trees. They're 2 years old and it's having a few issues with them. Just waiting for those pictures to come up. There. Here we go. So we've got some definite issues on the maples there. The branch, that stem looks like that's physical damage. It looks possibly the sort of thing you'd see where you've got a tree growing in the lawn and somebody hits it with a line trimmer. So it's some sort of physical damage of some sort, whether it's been hit with a garden tool or whether maybe an animal's come in there and chewed part of that trunk. It doesn't look too bad. I think the plant will just continue to heal that wound over. It's already in the process of healing that wound over. So I would just persevere with that tree, keep it well fed and well watered through the summer months, and just keep an eye on it that it doesn't weaken up. The only issue you might find is if that becomes a weak point, that in higher winds or adverse weather conditions, that could be a point where that tree could snap or crack or break even further. And keep an eye out for fungal infections as well. So just make sure it's not getting soft or decaying. You might need to put a fungicide, just a copper-based fungicide, spray it right into that wound area just to prevent any fungal infections. But otherwise, I would go the fingers crossed approach. Hopefully that trunk will continue to thicken up and be able to eventually grow that wound out to a point where the trunk's strong enough to stand up and keep that tree growing long term. So yeah, it's definitely some sort of physical damage rather than a pest or a disease. Now, Maria Fokic has sent in a photo again with another pest problem. On their butterfly bush on the Gora, that has some waxy scale on it, Maria. So waxy scale is another fairly common garden pest. You'll see it on a whole range of garden plants. Generally, if the plant's otherwise healthy, it doesn't really knock the plant around too much. And but you definitely don't want to allow it to get into the population of those that pest to explode. So a horticultural oil, so something like pest oil or one of the white oils, is very effective on waxy scale, but you do need to spray the really thoroughly over the pest, because it works by basically clogging up the plant, so the pest, so it can no longer function, and eventually it'll die. But it won't drop off straight away. It'll stay on there for quite a while. But 2 to 3 sprays of white oil, about 7 days apart, and you'll clear that up. It will also, if there's any small ones on there, knock them off. And you may need to do a spray in early spring, a couple of sprays as well, because that's when the crawlers, the little juvenile forms of the scale, are out and about and finding more spots to infect your plant in. So a spray in early spring, just a couple of sprays, just to maybe knock any of those crawlers off and prevent another population of them establishing there. But it's not something I'd be overly worried about, but I'd still be getting on top of it and trying to eradicate that pest before it has a really negative effect on your little butterfly plant. Now, Tina Weber also has a Mandanella in a tube stock received from Queensland with custom fees. As I mentioned with the previous listener, they are a beautiful plant. In Tasmania, you'll need to keep them nice and warm, as you can, and it's out of the cold, and don't let them get too wet, or the soil stay too wet for too long during that time of the year until we get into the warmer months. Beautiful plant, but will take in the southern states of Australia, does take a little bit of TLC, a little bit of babying to get them through first couple of winters, but once they're established and they harden off to the climate, they do very well and are absolutely stunning when they're in full flower. We've got Jeanette Fenton in Victoria, has a new garden area, about 6 metres by 13 metres long, so that's a good size, covered in netting, small wire around the base to let the bees in, which is a very good idea. Has the ICB containers as wicking beds, which work very effectively. I know a lot of people are going over to those IBC containers and turning them into wicking beds and finding them to be very effective way, particularly to grow all their veggies. Find it much easier to keep the water up with the wicking beds. Dividing the areas, she's dividing the areas up. One area is Berrylicious Berryland. Well, that's a very descriptive name, and I'm assuming growing lots of berries in that area. Has read not to plant raspberries and strawberries too close to each other because of blight. Well, it is a good idea to keep those two plants apart. I would be trying to keep them at least 5, 6, 7 metres apart, if not further than that, if you can. It's got Herbalicious and Greenland on the other side, so I'm guessing Herbalicious is the herb growing area, and Greenland may be all your leafy greens. So you can grow them over in that part of the garden, absolutely. The thing to remember about raspberries is they're very invasive. They will spread through whatever area you give them to grow in. They'll say, thank you very much, and take over all of that area. I would be dedicating one of those IBC containers just for the raspberries, because they will fill that up very quickly, and they do very well with wicking beds. When raspberries are actively growing and when they're starting to produce fruit, they're very thirsty plants, so a wicking bed is a perfect way to grow them, and it's a perfect way to isolate them and their root system from the rest of your garden, and just keep them in one little spot, keep them isolated, and they'll be much easier to control, because otherwise you'll end up with, instead of having berry land and herbalicious land, you'll just have berry land everywhere once those raspberries get growing. So, and a great idea having them under netting, because the other thing, other than people that like raspberries, birds love raspberries as well. But beautiful soft fruit, and they will go through your crop very quickly, and you'll miss out on a lot of them. Now, Margaret Champion in Belgrave has a beautiful magnolia tree, about 2 metres tall. Its root system came out of the bottom of the pot when it was growing on the paving. It's repotted into a bigger pot, but the leaves have gone brown and the tree looks very sick. So, Margaret, that's definitely a result of that root getting out through the bottom of the pot into the paving and then having to be cut for repotting. So it's basically gone into a form of shock. Just make sure you keep it reasonably moist, so the soil in the pot now doesn't dry out completely. Put some seaweed solution on, some sea salt, give it a couple of doses of that, at least about a week apart. And then it really is just fingers crossed and hoping that that damaged root wasn't the main root that was feeding the plant, that it's still able to absorb nutrients and moisture with the rest of the root system, what's left of it. And it may take a little while to recover. don't be too concerned if nearly all the foliage drops off the plant. It's something you see quite often when plants go into shock. And it's one of the reasons with our potted plants, we often recommend to people get them up off the paving, up off the ground. So you can get the little pot stands or little pot feet that go under the pots, keep them a little bit off the ground so that that root system can't get out of the bottom of the pots and grow into the paving, because with a lot of plants, they definitely will if you give them the opportunity. But just keep that plant, maybe somewhere out of the extreme sun for a while, so slightly shaded area. Don't let the potting mix dry out completely. Seaweed solution, and then hopefully in early spring you'll see signs of new growth and your magnolia will recover and be very happy. I've seen magnolias get really bad treatment when they've been repotted, go into a really bad condition, just sulk their little hearts out, and then regrow and look beautiful within 12 months. So I wouldn't lose all hope just yet, but wait till spring and see how it goes. Now, Shay Lee in Perth loves coriander. Has tried to grow it multiple times, but every time it does, it bolts and dies. Well, Shay Lee, that's a common experience for just about anyone growing coriander. It does, particularly in the warmer weather, it will bolt to seed very, very quickly. So there are slow bolt varieties available on the market, so you need to look out for those and use it. See it as only a cool time of the year coriander herb. So you're only growing that in winter, particularly in Perth. Even our warm parts of spring and autumn, that coriander is just going to bolt to seed in absolutely no time. So go for the slow bolt varieties, grow that in back end of autumn into winter, and you'll get a longer period out of it, but they still aren't a long-term herb. You're not going to have a coriander plant that you're keeping for 2 or 3 years like you can do with parsley, for example. So good luck with that. I love coriander. Not everybody does, though. Paulie in Ocean Reef has gnats in their greenhouses, worried about them. They are in greenhouses and those enclosed areas. You will get fungus gnats growing in a lot of your plants. So one of the things they really do like is if the potting mix is really wet, they will breed up a lot more actively in wet potting mix as they do in drier potting mix. So maybe just try and ease back a little bit on the water. See if you can keep plants looking really, really good, but with the potting mix a little drier. You can also put things like diatomaceous earth over the top of the pots, or even just coarse gravel, put that over the top of the pots. Make sure there's no water sitting in trays or just stagnant water sitting around for the gnats to use as a breeding area. Good air movement's really important. And as a last resort, you can also apply a granular systemic insecticide to your plants as well that's taken up by the root system of the plants, and that will help keep the gnat population under control as well. So it's a little bit of getting the conditions less favourable for the gnats to breed in, and a little bit of trying to go at them head on as well with a couple of other, with a systemic insecticide, and topping the pots up with some gravel as well. Penny McDoodle wants to know if it's true that custard apples cannot be grown in Victoria. Penny, I don't know. I've never tried to grow a custard apple in Victoria. I would imagine some of the cooler climate varieties would grow in Victoria and do quite well. They're quite resilient plants, custard apples, and they're one of those ones. I think when I first went into the plant world many years ago, we were told you couldn't grow custard apples in Perth, and custard apples now that you see them everywhere around Perth, producing heaps and heaps of fruit. There's one in my garden that I do absolutely nothing to, and I get about 30 fruit off it a year. So I would look at some of the colder, hardier variety ones and look at putting them in and finding a nice warm area, plant them in mid-spring when it's nice and warm, get them in the ground and just give it a go, see how they go. The history of gardening is the history of people growing plants that they're told they wouldn't be able to grow. So I'd definitely give them a go. If you contact your local garden centre who might specialise in fruit trees and ask them to recommend a couple of cold hardy varieties, I think it'd be really worth having a go at them. Jeanette Fenton has got back to us about the blight question on the raspberries and said thank you for that, and also has a previous chestnut tree question. So very happy to dedicate one of the IBCs to the red raspberries and one to yellow raspberries. That's a good idea as well, because they will intermingle. I think it's much better to keep them separate and in one planter each. The yellow raspberries are absolutely delicious. I don't know if you had the chance to try them yet, Jeanette, but I find them actually nicer than the red raspberries, and I love red raspberries as well. And she said, yes, the herbalicious area is for herbs. Well, I thought that was pretty obvious, Jeanette. And I really love your idea of having the garden separated into those separate areas and giving them really cool names as well. Fantastic thing to do. Wendy Gavin has camellia flowers that are dropping very early and they're brown, and wants to obviously know how to get them healthier. When camellias are dropping their flowers, Wendy, it's a bit of a signal that there's a couple of things possibly going wrong with the growing habits of your camellias. Whether the soil's not in good enough condition, camellias do like slightly acidic soil. If it starts to tip over a little bit into the even neutral zone or into alkaline soil, they don't grow anywhere near as well. And one of the first things that suffers from that issue is the flowering. Also, they do like minerals in their soil. So if your soil's been depleted of minerals, you may need to apply something like some trace elements as a liquid form or even as a rock mineral. Rock minerals are really good for camellias because they release those trace elements in a slower manner rather than dumping them all on the camellia in one go. And the other thing is just making sure during the warmer months that the soil doesn't dry out. So if your soil with your camellias, if they're in pots or in the ground, is having periods where it dries out and then you get it nice and moist again, or watering, or we get a bit of rain, that variation of soil being nice and moist and then really dry can result in poor flowering as well. So that would be the two things I'd be looking at, is nutrition and just making sure you're keeping that soil nice and moist, and check your pH. It's always a good idea if you're having any problems with pretty much any plant, just check your soil pH. It's a very quick test to do and just see where they are. Ideally with your camellias, it should be around 6. Good luck with that. I love camellias, one of my absolutely favourite flowering plants of all time. Now, Val, who happens to be Holly's mum, finally found a snail vine at the Guildford Nursery. There are only 2 left. They've been hard to get over the last probably 20 years. And they mentioned they're an old-fashioned plant, which they certainly are, and you don't see them around very much. Loves them and excited. So Val loves the snail vine. Very excited to see them growing. And says they don't have a smell. Well, they definitely should have a smell, Val. Snail vines, the flowers on them are beautifully perfumed, particularly if you've got the form that has the predominantly white flower with a bit of purple through it. That is beautifully perfumed. The form that's all purple can have less of a perfume. The perfume's more prominent in the warm part of the day, so a bit of sun on the flower warms up those essential oils in the flower and lets the perfume out. But they definitely should have perfume. Wonderful climbing plant, the snail creeper, and haven't seen them around much. And I think there's a few growers have decided to get back into putting them back out to the market, which is a fantastic thing. I like a lot of the old-fashioned flowering plants. Now, Margaret Campion in Belgrave has a peony rose and wants to know what to do to make them flower. Well, it depends a little bit on which peony you have, Margaret. Some of them require quite high chilling as well. So they will do very well in the colder parts of the southern states of Australia. They like nice, heavy, loamy soils that stay moist right through the summer months. And they also like to be well fed. So you're feeding them during the warm months when they're actively growing with a complete garden fertilizer. Other than that, there's not much else you can really do. So chilling requirements is really important. A couple of the growers now do have a hybrid variety of tree peony, or of peony roses that are a hybrid between the traditional herbaceous peonies and the tree peony. The tree peony is a lot hardier and warm climate hardier than the traditional herbaceous peony, so they're available on the market as well. So if you're in a more iffy area for peonies, you could look out for the hybrid varieties and give them a go. But it's just chilling, water through summer, and keep them well fed, and you should see some of those beautiful, magnificently perfumed flowers. Maxine wants to know how to get rid of whiteflies in a hothouse. I've tried everything to no avail. Now, whitefly will tend to breed if the air movement isn't great. So we used to see them a lot in the wholesale nurseries, where in the shade houses where you didn't have good air movement. So air movement's really important, and something low impact like a pyrethrum spray can get the numbers down on the whitefly as well. So maybe spread the plants out a little bit further in the hothouse. Don't have them all cramped into each other. Open the windows up if you can during the day to try and get some air movement through there, and that will help keep the whitefly numbers down. And an occasional spray of pyrethrum spray will knock them off and get the numbers down to a manageable level as well. Fiona Goodridge in Hammersley put some oxyfert down on their lawn about 2 weeks ago and mowed 1 week ago. Wants to know whether she should fertilise as well coming into winter. Fiona, like, you're probably at a point at how the weather is in Perth at the moment, you could go one more run with the granular fertiliser. So you get a granular fertiliser on the lawn now, or you could go straight over now to the foliar fertilisers. So there are fertilisers in liquid forms. You apply with a backpack, and you can get some with a hose on. So either way, with a hose on applicator or with a backpack, and go with those liquid fertilisers. That really add a fair bit of easily available iron and magnesium to the lawn. That helps keep it healthier right through the winter months. So, yep, either way you go. We've still probably got enough warm weather in Perth that you could go granular if you prefer that. Wendy Gavin wants to know how to get rid of paspalum in the lawn. So it depends what sort of lawn you have, Wendy. You need to look for a selective herbicide that will take out paspalum. So you go into your local garden, your hardware store, have a look at the selective herbicides. You need to identify what lawn type you have, make sure that herbicide is suitable for your lawn type and that it's registered for the control of paspalum. You should be able to find that fairly easily, but at a local garden centre or local hardware store. And just remember that you need to not mow for 7 days beforehand before you apply those selective herbicides. You want as much leaf mass of the weed there to take that selective herbicide up, and you can't mow for a further 7 days after applying it. But always with any of those products, read the instructions very thoroughly to make sure you do it exactly how you're supposed to and get the best results. Now, we've only got 10 minutes left to go, so we need to if you've got a question, you need to get it in the next 10 minutes. We've got a few to get through, so I wouldn't sit on your hands if there is a question you really need answering. Now, Glenn in Sydney, his Japanese camellias are flowering like mad and wants to know, can he prune them once they finish flowering? And if so, how hard can he prune them? Well, Glenn, you can certainly prune your Japanese camellias. So they're the Sasanqua species, autumn flowering ones, flowering magnificently at the moment. So masses and masses of flowers. So the plants get completely covered with them, and then the ground around them gets beautifully decorated with the spent petals. You can prune them whatever way you want to go, Glenn. So if you're just looking to tidy the shrub up, so you can give it a light prune all over the plant to tidy it up, to get it into a more compact, neat shape. Or if you need to, you can cut them back as hard as you like. In a previous life, I used to graft camellias, and we used the Sasanquas as a rootstock. We'd take a 3-year-old seedling Sasanqua camellia, cut it back to 3 centimetres tall, put a graft in, and away it'd go. If the graft failed, that Sasanqua camellia would just shoot and grow away. So you can prune them back as hard as you like. They're incredibly tough. Gay Mather in Beverley wants to know if she can prune her hydrangeas now. They're very leggy and unruly. Absolutely, Gay. You can get in there and give them a tidy up prune now. Be looking for those big fat buds that will produce your summer flowers this year, and don't take those off, but tidy it up. Any of that leggy, twiggy growth, get rid of that. Anything that's slightly damaged or may have been hit with some leaf fungus, take those out, clean them all up. You can give them a spray of lime sulfur as well, just to act as a bit of a preventative for fungal diseases and clean up any mites or thrips that may be overwintering in that plant. And then give that ground a layer of compost around them and a bit of a mulch, and they'll be ready to go the following summer. Beautiful plants, hydrangeas, should be planted a lot more, in my opinion. Kerry McClure wants to know how often she should liquid fertilise her veggies. I'd be doing them weekly, depending on what you're growing, and the time of the year. I like to liquid feed weekly. Always give your veggies, if you're growing them out of punnets, give them a liquid feed as soon as you plant them, and then regularly keep that liquid feed up, keep them actively growing, so they get up and produce beautiful crops. Particularly the leafy greens, I definitely do those weekly. Some of the other veggies you could do it fortnightly if required. Henley's Rustics wants to know if there's any veggies that don't like being in wicking beds. None that I've heard of or seen. I've know a lot of people who are very active vegetable growers with wicking beds, and they grow everything in wicking beds: pumpkins, cucumbers, tomatoes, corn, broccolis and cabbage, and cauliflowers at this time of the year, all growing beautifully, and they do fantastically well. It's a great way to grow veggies, and particularly people who are in houses with not the same sort of garden space we may have been used to many years ago. A wicking bed can give you a great crop in a very small amount of space. And for most people, they find it a lot easier because they don't have to be so attentive with the watering. The wicking bed is just constantly supplying moisture to those veggies, and they do far better than if they're going through the getting well watered and then having a couple of days where they dry out and then they get watered again. So there's not a veggie I can think of wouldn't have an issue trying. Even root vegetables, I've known people with wicking beds to grow potatoes, carrots, parsnips, and such forth in a wicking bed. So just go for it. Only limit your imagination. Margaret Campion in Belgrave, another question from Margaret, wants to know if she can move a well-established rose into a bigger pot, and if so, when? Well, you certainly can, Margaret. Best time to do it is when that rose is completely dormant. So middle of winter, all the foliage has dropped off it, or most of the foliage has dropped off it. It's ready for its hard winter prune. So do your hard winter prune, spray it with your lime sulfur or whatever preventative spray you use to keep the fungus and mites and thrips at bay. Then dig it up, get as much of the roots as you can into your pot. Good quality potting mix, water it in really well when you first repot it. Apply a seaweed solution, some sea salt, and by early spring, that'll be full of fresh growth and looking fantastic again. Caroline Nathan wants to know that proteas didn't flower last summer. They were new this year. There's a lot of growth. Wants to know whether they should prune them or cut them back now. Now, Caroline, with the proteas, they sometimes take a couple of years to get established. So they might take 2 or 3 springs before they really have a good crop of flowers. You can prune them now if you want to, and you're looking at trying to keep them more compact. Proteas can get a little bit leggy. The good thing about them, though, is once they do start flowering, they flower very heavily, and you can do your pruning with those by simply pruning the flowers off for vase, to put them into the vase in the house. And that if you prune all those, pruning a lot of the flowers off to use them for vases, then you do most of your pruning at that time. So just a little bit of patience. They will come on and start flowering, and once they do, you'll get lots and lots of flowers. Candice Weber has a dwarf nectarine, and what I've got up here, it says, should she pray for leaf curl? I wouldn't pray for leaf curl, but I definitely spray for leaf curl. So as that foliage is falling off, you can start spraying. You can start spraying now, really. So you can use a copper-based spray or a Bordeaux mix if you want to do your own Bordeaux mix. You can spray them now. That'll actually speed up the process of getting the rest of the leaves off them. With your peaches and your nectarines, it's really important that you do spray for leaf curl, because that peach leaf curl will really drag a lot of the vigor out of your plant during the warm months when they're actively growing, and can affect and disfigure your fruit as well. So a spray now, and then you're spraying probably another 2 or 3 times during the winter months. Make sure you get that spray right into every nook and cranny on the plant, because those fungal spores will overwinter right in the crevices of the flower buds and the leaf buds. So good solid spray now, and a few more sprays during the winter months. Now, final question is from Sandra Coombs. Wants to know what she can do with all the leaves that's falling from the deciduous trees. There's mountains of them. Well, I know exactly how you feel, Sandra. I've got mountains and mountains of deciduous leaves falling in my garden as well. The best thing you can do with them, in my opinion, is you either compost them, so put them into the compost bin, feed them back into the garden if you've got space. They'll break down, form beautiful leaf mold, which becomes a nutrients that really builds up your soil. Or if you've got a lot of them on your lawn and you've got a rotary lawnmower, run the mower over, break them all up, and they get mixed up with the blades of grass and then into your compost heap, and away you go. By the start of this summer, they'll be ready to be put out in the garden and be feeding your soil. So thank you, everybody, for all your great questions this morning. Been lots of variety, and I really hope I've helped a few of you with my advice with your gardening needs. Always a pleasure to be on the show. I'm sure if Trevor was going travelling anywhere else in the world, I might get the opportunity to duck in again and have a chat with you another time. Really enjoyed it. Now, our winner of the $50 gift voucher from Garden Express this week is Margaret Campion. Thank you for all your great questions, Margaret. Very interesting questions, and always great to hear from. Congratulations. To claim your prize, Margaret, you just need to message us on Facebook with your email address. So make sure you hit that like button on the Facebook post, and make sure you tune in next week. Send some more messages in. Trevor will be back, I feel sure. So another great live show coming up next week. You can always jump on our Facebook page, catch up with any old episodes of the Garden Gurus, and of course, tune in tomorrow for another fantastic episode. Happy gardening, everyone, and I hope to talk to you soon.